This video is designed to help you work with this special clay that I've bought for you. It is called, it's an air dry clay, and it doesn't have to go into a kiln. Actually, if you put it into a kiln, it would melt everywhere. So it air dries and becomes hard, but it's not water soluble. Okay, so that's the big difference and something you really need to understand. The clay that we work with that is fired in a kiln becomes stone, right, and ceramic. And we know how versatile that is. We can put it in the microwave, we can put it in the dishwasher, we can put water in it, but this is the opposite. So with this type of clay, when it dries, we will be able to decorate it, but then that's really what it is. It's a decoration. You will not be able to put water in it. You will not be able to use it for food or drink. It'll just kind of be a shelf piece, okay? The other thing about this clay is it comes in two colors, white and red. And I tried very hard to get the white clay for a couple of reasons. One, it's kind of closer to the clay that we use in our ceramic studio. Also, I thought that it would allow us to maybe be more versatile with colors that we put on the surface. And the third reason I like the white is because it is a little bit less messy. But given the pandemic and COVID-19, it was really, really hard to find this clay. And I was lucky enough that my distributor had exactly 300 pounds left, and that was it, but only in the red clay. And the actual factory that makes this clay, they are currently shut down. They're not producing more clay until June. So I literally got the last 300 pounds that are in our region, and like I said, it was only red clay. But I thought, well, it's going to be really, really different experience, and that might be enjoyable as well. So it's going to work just fine. What I want to start by doing is helping you get set up. How do we work with this clay in particular, but also how do we work at home? You don't have the luxury of the studio and all of the, purposeful ceramic tools at your fingertips. You're gonna have to be a little bit inventive and creative to make things go the way you want them to. So I'm gonna start off by giving you a few tips. The first thing is you will be receiving a bag of this air dry clay that will be located at the school in a lobby, and it is going to be wrapped in plastic with a label on it. The label will have your name on it. I'm doing it that way because the students who have completed all of their remote learning projects for me, that's when I get your clay ready for you. So if you never complete those, then you'll never get a bag of clay. So please, please, please get those completed so you can have some of this, okay? The other thing is you need to have your sketch available. So this was part of the remote learning. So in order to get your clay, I know that you had to have this done because you posted it on your website. But you're gonna want this, near you and available to you so you can reference it. And then if you take a look at my tabletop, so I am, in my kitchen and I'm really simulating working at home. The first advice I want to give you is try to find a space that you can stay set up, for a couple days. So it's going to be really tricky if, you have to clean up that space every single day. But you know what? We'll survive that if that's your situation. But if you do have a spot in the garage or at home where you can set up your space for a few days and leave it, that would be most ideal. You're going to want to cover your table surface, whatever surface it is you're working on. Like I said, the red clay can be kind of messy. It's red in color because it has a lot of iron in it. And, iron can stain a little bit. Not permanently, okay? But it just takes a little bit longer for that residue to eventually fade away. So if you look at what I've done, I have taken a trash bag and I cut the seams to, you know, open it up and lay it flat. And then I taped it to my work surface so that when I'm working on this, it's not shifting and moving around everywhere. Another good thing you could do is if you have cardboard laying around, and you can lay a big piece of cardboard down. Newspaper, of course, always works great, but you're definitely gonna wanna cover your surface. Not only to protect it, but we also know that clay likes to stick, and so we wanna protect those surfaces. I also then went around in my house and gathered some tools that I think would be most helpful to you. A rolling pin, okay, if you have one at home, is great, especially if you've decided you are going to work with some slabs. If you're not going to work with slabs, then you really don't need this. But remember that this is non-toxic and it does wash off. So using kitchen tools, you know, may seem kind of scary, but I promise you they'll wash off. And especially if you have a dishwasher and you could stick them in there, not only will it wash it, but it'll sanitize it. So don't be nervous to use some kitchen tools. So rolling pin is great. Any sort of wooden kitchen tool is wonderful. I thought about this spoon as a paddle, okay? No matter what method you're gonna be working with, paddling your clay is something we always need to do. I just used a regular old butter knife to use as a cutting knife. Okay, a fork is definitely gonna be your scoring tool. I have also, you know, plastic knives and spoons that, you know, could work as well. It's just clay likes to really stick to plastic sometimes, so it may not always be your best option, but once it gets in leather hard stage, then you can use these tools really well. I found this tool, so this is a skewer. And what I like about it, one, it has a really sharp edge if I want to do any kind of carving. But I also found this loop on this one end, which I think you can figure out would be a great loop tool. So if you're going to be working with Sculpt and Hollow, you're going to want to find something with a loop so you can scoop out and hollow out your clay. You know, you're going to need to have Tupperware to put some water in for those leather hard stages. Also, I just thought about things around the house that you can use as templates, you know, for tracing around and getting your shapes. This ruler is something I really enjoy working with. One, it's flexible, okay, so it allows me to, you know, curve it around dimensional pieces, but honestly, the edge of it too, because it curves like a rubber rib, it's the best tool to kind of simulate that rubber rib. And then if you need something to cut your large pieces of clay, you know, you really don't want to do it with a little plastic knife. So we don't have our wire tools at home, but any sort of a thin string or twine would work best. And to be quite honest, the best thing that you could use is dental floss. Because it's so strong and thin, it'll just slice through your clay very easily. Okay, so these are just some of the tools around the house that will get you started, but you know, you're gonna have to decide as you go on what you need and what you need specifically, and that's kind of gonna be like a scavenger hunt around the house. Remember thinking about molds. If you're gonna be working with the mold method, you know, this was a carafe, a plastic carafe that I have in my cabinet, which I thought, wow, that's a beautiful shape, it'd be a great mold. Just remember to, you know, same rule applies, cover it with paper towel before you wrap your clay around it. All right, to get going, I first wanted to explain my drawing to you. So my inspiration was the apothecary jars from Italy during Renaissance times. And the apothecary jars, I think, are just really cool because it's about containing medicines and herbal remedies. They're highly decorative, and they're made from a red clay as well, which was really cool. But it's a technique called maiolica, and it's a highly painted surface full of like really beautiful colors and details. And so I was inspired by that, and I thought, well, there's no better time to try to come up with some sort of medicine or remedy than right now, as we are all staying at home and learning virtually because of COVID-19. So this is kind of my dedication, my ode to COVID-19. So what I have here is all of the brown represents the red clay. So I'm going to leave a lot of that brown showing in my end product because it is a rich, beautiful brown clay, and I want to work with it. Right here in the center, okay, this is going to be some texture that I stamp. And this is gonna be a slab that I stamp, and then the bottom and the lid portion I'm gonna add with coils, do coil construction. On my lid, I'm going to have a gallery on the container, okay? And my knob is going to be a little kind of COVID virus cell. And then most apothecary jars have some sort of painted label on it, so I've included my painted label. And I want to just give you some tips about, working with your slab and stamping at home. So this is the clay that I pulled out of my bag, and I'm slicing a piece through it with my twine, and I've almost pulled it all the way through, okay? And this is the piece I'm going to use for making my slab. And so the other piece I'm going to continue to store in my bag. Your stages of clay are the same, okay? You're going to have wet clay, leather hard, greenware, and then you're going to have, we're going to say dry. It's not going to be fired in a kiln, but all of the moisture will have evaporated, and then you'll be able to decorate it. The stages are going to move differently though, okay? It's not going to be like our studio clay, so you're just going to have to pay attention to it. And the nice thing is the bell's not going to ring, right? So you can continue to work with it as long as you need to, but know that there's still stages. So if all of your pieces are wet clay and you need to move it onto leather hard, well, you are at a standstill until it moves on to leather hard, okay? All right, I'm going to go ahead and pound this out a little bit and start to spread out my slab just so you can see that we work with it in the same way. It behaves the same way. You can throw your slab just like we do in the studio to help spread it out. This clay is a little bit like the raku clay in the sense that it comes pre-wedged and it's very dense, all right? But it's different with the raku clay because it's a lot softer. It's not coarse like raku clay. It doesn't have any grog or sand in it. So it's almost a very kind of soft, buttery feeling, and not earthy and rocky feeling at all. Okay, so I'm spreading this out. I'm going to go ahead and move on to my rolling pin now, and using the same techniques that I would use with my shop clay is I like to roll the clay away from me. Make sure you flip and roll it from all directions so that you get a nice even slab. Now, if you wind up with a bunch of small pieces, and you want to reuse those pieces, of course, you do want to kind of re-wedge those as well. All right, so I've got it spread out, and just like our studio clay, you're going to want to compress that slab. That prepares your surface for the next steps. So, like I said, I've really enjoyed this curved ruler, and I've just been using that to kind of smooth the clay and compress it down. Working with this plastic, I've been getting, some wrinkle marks in there, which maybe is something you want to actually use to your advantage. That's up to you. Okay. So once you get it smoothed out the way you like, then like I said, for me, I'm going to be doing a lot of stamping, and just like our texture project when we learned about stamping, again, it's a really fun scavenger hunt. What do you see around the house that would make a really cool stamp? I've found a lot of fun things. So we've talked before about lace. It is definitely one of my favorite things to use for textures. But unless, you can throw it in the washing machine and clean it, be warned that this will become dirty. Okay, but there's some really lovely texture. I look around the house too, and I found a shoe that had some cool textures on the sole of the shoe. And pressing that into my clay leaves a really fun pattern. This little piece I have here is just from, it's screen, from a screen door. And if I lay that down and either rub my finger on it, or you can use a rolling pin over it, or you can use whatever tool you're kind of using as a rib and then peel it back. You get a really fun, subtle texture. Again, looking around the house, absolutely anything that has texture, you guys know, is going to leave some sort of a mark. Working with oranges and things like that are fun because you can roll it around and get a really nice textured marking. Look at the avocado, beautiful. Okay. We've learned that leaves, go outside, pick some really interesting leaves or bark or something from nature and lay it in your clay. And then again, either roll over it and press it into the clay and then peel it out, and you get some really nice little patterns. The other thing you can use, which are reusable, which is kind of cool, is fake flowers and fake leaves. You can kind of tear them apart and roll them into the clay, and they make great little patterns. Okay. The other thing you can use is straight up stamps. So I have a few foam stamps from like old scrapbooking and things like that, and you can use these, tap them in, pull them out, and leave some marks. Okay, so you already know about stamping, but what I did in order to get my project started is I stamped my slab, and then I knew the size that I wanted my slab, so I already had my paper template, right? And I laid it down, and then I've been enjoying using just the metal butter knife for cutting my clay. Okay. Cut the clay. Save your scraps. You'll need them for either, rolling coils or making other slabs. Okay, and then once I had that slab, I needed to mold it around something. So I found a water bottle, and this was my textured slab. Okay, I used lace and some of that screen. I kept this blank because this is where I'm going to carve COVID-19, use some stamps, and then I took it and I wrapped it around this water bottle. So what I'm going to do now is wait for this to get leather hard so that I can build on the top and the bottom of it and take it to the next step. Okay, I finished constructing my remote learning clay project, and as you can see, it is dry. I tap it, you can hear that it's firmed up, but to be quite honest, on the interior, it is still a little bit soft. So it does take quite a while to totally dry out. I recommend, honestly, on a sunny day, to put it outside and it'll dry a lot faster. Take the lid off so air can get into the inside, and it'll dry a lot faster for you, because then you're ready to apply color. And I want to talk with you about, applying color at home, again, when we're not using traditional glazes. and you may not have a lot of materials to work with at home. So I want to show you a variety of options. Before you get started on applying color, one really cool thing to take note is that your entire design, whatever it is, can be drawn on with pencil, and then you can use that guideline to apply the color. Okay, so here are a variety of options you can use to apply color, and maybe you'll find these things at home. The first I have over here is some spray paint. Spray paint will work really well with this. Another thing you might have laying around the house or in the garage or something is actual latex paint. So the paint that we use to paint our walls inside of our house, or some things outside, you can use this to paint on top of your vessel. So you would just use it like regular paint, get a small paintbrush, apply it and let it dry. Of course, a really great option if you have it at home would be acrylic paint. Acrylic paint is great because you can, mix colors to get a nice variety of colors. Only a few tubes will get you a really good variety of colors, but it adheres to the air dry clay really nicely and will give you good, solid, opaque coverage. But if you don't have paints at home, no worries. There are other materials that you can use. One of them is markers. Any kind of marker will work. I really like the Sharpie because it has more of a permanent last to it, and also is a little bit brighter. But you can just, decorate strictly with marker. I actually used marker in some of these areas, kind of these leaf silhouettes, the stripes up here. That was all Sharpie marker, so it worked really well. I've also played around with crayons. If it's really dry, and there's not any moisture left in the surface, you can also use crayons. It will adhere to the surface well enough so that you can get some color on there. The only thing that does not work really well would be like a watercolor paint. And that's because, we talked about this type of clay, that it's not water soluble. So you can kind of easily melt it down and reactivate it if you apply water to it. If I were to start applying water to this, it would just kind of, melt away eventually. And so when you work with watercolor, you have to use so much water to work with that paint that really it's going to deteriorate, wind up deteriorating your container. So I would kind of stay away from watercolor paint. But be creative, and don't be afraid to try things. I'm really hoping that you can be inventive, and at the very least that you have something enjoyable that you can accomplish over remote learning time. Please remember that when it's complete, try your best to take a good finished photo of it, preferably with a solid background, not a lot of things going on around it. This is what you will turn into me. It'll go on your website, and then I will also be producing an online art gallery for our website to showcase the ceramic work that we were able to achieve at home. So good luck.